What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my early thoughts ahead of the Game Week 8 deadline. In this case, very early thoughts because obviously we're in an international break, but I'm going to go for a few players that I think are worth talking about and then go through some of my notes from the weekend as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. So let's start with Luis Díaz. We've had the blank against Wolves in Game Week 5 and now the benching against Crystal Palace in Game Week 6. So what should we do with him moving forward? I think at this point, he's definitely not someone that I would look to buy. I know I've said that for a few weeks now, but I definitely wouldn't buy him at this point. You know that he can get rotated in the league with Gakpo. It's Chelsea at home, Arsenal away next. There's just no need to buy someone that you can't even be 100% sure is going to start that also has those fixtures as well. I don't think Chelsea is super tough. Liverpool will get chances, especially at home, but it's not an easy fixture. Then Arsenal away is about as difficult as it's going to get all season. So I wouldn't buy him. If you've got him, I wouldn't say he's a major rush to sell, but I'd lean more towards selling him soon rather than keeping him. Remember after the last international break, Arne Slot said that he intended to play Gakpo and Luis Díaz came back fitter. So there's not even a guarantee that he will start against Chelsea. I think he will because he is clearly first choice left winger for Liverpool, but it's not a guarantee. So I think if you've got the spare transfer and there's someone like a Spurs midfielder potentially that you want to buy instead, I think that's a pretty decent move. If you're sat there with one free transfer and eventually you want to upgrade Díaz to like a Palmer, a Saka or a Son or someone like that, and you need the extra transfer to, get rid of funds from somewhere else, I think it's okay to play him against Chelsea and then maybe make that double move in Game Week 9 rather than take a hit this week. But I just think going forward, he always gets subbed early and there's no guarantee that he's going to start every game. And that would worry me is probably like a little bit dramatic, but that would frustrate me going forward. And you look at the next 6 game weeks, I think he starts at least 4 of them. I think that's the minimum. He probably even could start 5 of them, but he's not going to start all 6. And if he is first choice, and maybe I'm just going down creating a narrative here, you'd expect him to start the more difficult games, right? The Chelsea at home, the Arsenal away, the Man City at home, in which case he's possibly missing 1 or 2 of Brighton at home, Villa at home, Southampton away. Even if he misses just one of those, the fixture run just doesn't look so good over the next 6 weeks. So I would probably lean more towards selling, but I don't think he's like a must sell where you've got to get rid of him at all costs. And part of the reason is at his price, there's not really a huge amount of options, but I think the obvious ones to go for, if you haven't already got them, is Spurs midfielders. We saw yesterday against Brighton, I know they lost the game, they didn't stop attacking the whole time. And I think you've got to separate the football from the FPL. I think at the moment, Spurs fans are loving Ange Postecoglou, right? They see progress. They see a different brand of football to what they've been used to. Eventually, they might get frustrated with the lack of, wanting to control games and defend when you've got a lead and stuff like that. Who knows in the future? But for FPL, they keep attacking and we love that. So I think Maddison or Brennan Johnson look like really nice options to bring in ahead of Spurs' great fixture run. I think I would go for Brennan Johnson because of the money saving that you could then use elsewhere. But James Maddison is an excellent option too and cheaper than Luis Díaz. If you're not going for Spurs players, this is why I'm saying that Luis Díaz is not a must-sell. There's not a huge amount of other options, I don't think, that are standout right now. Obviously, if you haven't got Mbeumo, he's an obvious choice to go for too, even with Man United away this week. I don't think many people could stomach bringing Eze in right now, but he's 6.8 million. If he drops to 6.7 soon, I still think he's an okay price. When Mateta's not on the pitch, he's on penalties. The underlying numbers for the season are still good. And I know I can say that until I'm blue in the face and he keeps blanking and that will just be frustrating. But at some point, you would expect the fortune to basically... What am I trying to say? He'll start getting points, basically. I was trying to find a fancy way of saying that. And the fixtures are pretty good now for Crystal Palace. Forest away, I guess, is a little bit tricky. But then it's Spurs at home, Wolves away, Fulham at home, Villa away, Newcastle at home, Ipswich away. I don't mind any of those fixtures really from now until Game Week 14. But I just think at the moment people just won't go there. So I would go for a Spurs midfielder. After Eze and Mbeumo, you're really going down to like a Smith Rowe, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, a McNeil or someone like that. And I'm just not really a massive fan of going from Díaz to those players. So for me, it's either go to a Spurs midfielder or Eze if you can stomach it, or you're just waiting for funds to upgrade him to a premium midfielder instead, and you've got to decide on that structure. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more for my team later on because I've got a similar decision. But I just think for now, definitely not a buy. If I had him, I'd probably start leaning more towards selling him soon when I can. For anyone that is thinking about selling Díaz, I thought I'd have a quick look at the predicted points over on Fantasy Football Hub for any midfielders 8.1 million or below. And if you want to check this tool out and all the other ones they've got, there's a 7-day free trial at the moment and 30% off. I'll leave a link in the description below. So if I just go to midfielders, and we'll go to Luis Díaz's price at 8.1 over the next 5 game weeks, so 8 to 12. So they have got Eze as the best option. And again, I don't think people can buy him right now. I think they just won't be able to go through with it. But I do think he's probably a good option moving forward. Then it's Gordon, interestingly. Personally, for me with Gordon, the fact that he's got Chelsea away in 9 and Arsenal at home in 10 would put me off. And I know he took the penalty against Everton, and he'll probably take the next one as well. But once Isak and Wilson are back, which could be after the international break, they will take them. So I think at 7.3, Gordon is a pretty good price generally. I'm not sure I would go for him. Then it's in Burmo, obvious player to bring in if you don't own. Then it's Madison. Bowen, I didn't even mention at all earlier. Shouldn't forget about him. But I feel like he did well last week, but that was Ipswich at home. Like Spurs away, Man United at home, Forest away, next 3, not quite so good. Then it's Kulusevski, then it's Johnson. Personally, I prefer Johnson. But either way, Spurs midfielders, all 3 of them at this price range, are in the kind of top 6, 7 players to look to bring in. So if you want to check out that tool and all the other ones, like I said, link in the description below, 7-day free trial at the moment. They're your options that you're probably looking at bringing in if you're selling Díaz and you don't have money to upgrade. Let's talk about Bukayo Saka next. Last week, a few people sold him to get Cole Palmer after his 25-pointer. Now, after the 16-pointer that Saka's had against Southampton, he's starting to be transferred back in. He's had over 100,000 transfers in, and we're only a couple of days into the international break. So what should we be doing with him moving forward? Now, as an owner, I look at the fixtures coming up, and they're not great, but they don't scream must sell to me. So Liverpool at home in 9 and Chelsea away in 11 aren't ideal, but Bournemouth away in 8 and even Newcastle away in 10 are not terrible. And then from game week 12 onwards, the Arsenal fixtures are pretty good. So I think for most people that own Saka, he's a pretty good option just to keep hold of. I think if you were looking to sell him to a different premium, it's probably just the wrong week to buy Cole Palmer because he's got Liverpool away. So whatever you think of Saka, Bournemouth away is easier. And if you're going to make that move, I would probably do it in game week 9. So if you're considering Saka to Palmer still, I personally would make it in 9 when Palmer's got Newcastle at home followed by Man United away and Saka's got Liverpool at home followed by Newcastle away. Longer term, I'm not sure who I prefer between Saka and Palmer. I think for the amount of points Palmer has scored over the last kind of 38 game weeks, it's pretty tempting just to say that he's the one to go for. But obviously he is a bit more expensive as well. And from 12 onwards, both he and Saka have got good fixtures. So there's part of me that thinks if you've got Saka, just keep hold of him and maybe try and find a different way to get Palmer in. But I guess if I was wildcarding now and I was only picking one, I probably would just go for Palmer because he's been ridiculous in how many points he scored, not just this season, but last season as well. So I think it's okay to do Saka to Palmer, but I probably wouldn't make it this week. In terms of buying Saka, no issue with it, right? He's a good option, but I don't know if now is the right time to do it. Like Bournemouth away is fine, but then it is that Liverpool at home game. I guess it depends on who you're selling. Like if you're doing Díaz to Saka, that's fine, but obviously you're having to make a big downgrade somewhere else, and I just don't know if there's a massive rush to buy him. Like in terms of captaincy, for example, some people will have gone for Saka in game week 7 against Southampton. There's not really any game weeks coming up where I would look to captain him. Like next 4, I think Haaland against Wolves, Haaland against Southampton. Game week 10, it's Newcastle away, so Salah's got a better fixture against Brighton. Even Haaland's against Bournemouth away that week, I think. Then game week 11, Chelsea away, you're probably not going to be looking at Saka. So he's not a massive captain opportunity. So I think if you've got him, it's probably an easy keep this week. You could, by the way, that's what I'm rambling on about this, if he's fully fit, one move I'm going to consider is Saka to Son, just for a little bit, for the next few fixtures, to get West Ham at home, Palace away, Villa at home, and Ipswich at home. And then in game week 12, where Son plays Man City away, you could look to move back to Saka or have that as your jump-off point to go to Palmer, because Palmer's got Leicester away and then a really good fixture run after that. So that is something that you could consider chaining on. So Saka to Son, and then Son to either back to Saka or to Palmer if you've got a bunch of transfers spare. A lot of that is just going to depend on how your team is looking, how many transfers you've got, and whether obviously Son is fully fit, because it looks like he's going to miss out over the international break. If there's any doubts about Son, I just wouldn't go there. So Saka is brilliant. I think it's perfectly reasonable to bring him in. I wouldn't argue against that. But I don't think there's a rush to do it. I think most people's squads don't need to use multiple transfers to get Saka in. You can probably just roll for a couple of weeks and then just decide what to do when you've got more transfers built up. So let's talk about Emil Smith-Rowe next. Bench for the first time in game week 7 against Man City. Should anyone that owns him be looking to sell? I would say probably not. I don't think that Man City away being benched for that fixture is a massive indication of what's going to happen moving forward. And if we look at his minutes since the start of the season, they've just been increasing every single week. So 63 in game week 1, then 68, 71, 72, 83, 87. During that time, Marco Silva has been talking up about how much he wanted to bring him into the club, how well he's been doing, how he's been building up his fitness. I don't think all of that has suddenly changed because he's been benched in one of the hardest fixtures that Fulham are going to have all season. I think it was probably just a way they wanted to set up against City, and Smith-Rowe just wasn't part of those plans. So I would not be... Sorry, I would be shocked if he's not back in the team for Villa at home, is basically what I'm trying to say. And then after that, you've got Everton away, Brentford at home, Palace away, Wolves at home. That is a pretty nice fixture run over the next 5 game weeks. So I would be looking to hold Smith-Rowe. The numbers so far this season have been pretty good. 0.29 expected goals per 90, 0.15 expected assists. The minutes are going up, so you would expect him to be pushing 75 to 80 plus in most of these games as well. I guess the fact that he has been benched against City shows that he's not 100% nailed on, right? He's not a Mo Salah, Bruno Fernandes, Van Dijk type of player, but he's pretty close to it. He's like the next tier down. So I think he has got a great chance of starting 4 or even 5 of the next 5 fixtures. And I also think at that price, there's not a huge amount of other players to go to. If you've got money to upgrade to like a Brennan Johnson or an Eze or someone like that, fair enough, right? Make the move. But if you're looking to spend 5.8 million or less, I don't really know where people are going. I guess one player is McNeil at 5.6 million. And the fixtures are nice, right? Ipswich away, Fulham at home, Southampton away, West Ham away, Brentford at home. You could definitely argue that Everton's fixtures are better than Fulham's. I'm not sure I would necessarily trust McNeil to score more points, though. I think if I was sat there with Smith-Rowe on my team, okay, I'd be a little bit more worried than I was before the Man City game, but not massively. Would I use a transfer to get rid of him to buy McNeil? I just feel like that transfer is going to be much better used for a bigger move somewhere else. Semenyo is obviously a player that was quite popular over the last couple of weeks, but we know he runs into Arsenal at home in 8, Man City at home in 10. It's Villa away in 9 in between as well. You're not buying him. So who else really is there to go to? Like Morgan Rogers is definitely a good option, but I feel like at this point most people have him if they're going to buy him. Like, is Smith-Rowe to Rogers worth it? Probably not unless you need the money. So I don't think it's massively... I mean, I know Fulham scored a couple of goals in that game, so you could be looking at it saying it's a bit frustrating that Smith-Rowe didn't start, but he probably wasn't going to get many returns anyway. And we knew that once you got past that City game, the good fixtures would start up again for Fulham, and they have played well this year. So I think for the majority of people, unless you're looking to upgrade him, I think I would hold. Like, would I use a transfer to go to McNeil this week? I'm not convinced I would. And I know some people are worried about price drops and stuff like that. If you think he's going to get points, those prices could come back. So I think there's every reason to keep hold of him. And then I just want to go through some notes from the weekend. So Liverpool defence continues to be very good. Will that continue into the more tricky fixtures they've got coming up? And Konate, of course, has been absolutely great value. So far, I think Liverpool have kept 5 clean sheets in the first 7 game weeks. The only games they've conceded in is Wolves in game week 6 and Forest in game week 4, where they lost 1-0. But even in that game, the expected goals conceded on the FPL site is 0.44. So even in that match where they conceded 1 goal and lost, the defence put up a really good performance. And so I think we should expect them to be slightly better than they were last year under Jurgen Klopp. At least based off what we've seen so far. It is a small sample size, that's worth saying. I don't think they're suddenly an Arsenal-level defence, but the numbers they're putting up have been very, very good. And I think if I had Liverpool defenders, there probably wouldn't be a mad rush to sell them. Like even Chelsea at home, it's going to be tough to get a clean sheet, but not impossible. Arsenal away will be really difficult, but if you've got other players you could play instead, happy days. And then Brighton at home, Villa at home, they're both good attacking sides. But if Liverpool can be as solid as they've been so far, there is potential for more clean sheets there. And obviously, if you've got someone like Trent, there's attacking potential too. I think at the moment, it's probably not the right time to bring Liverpool players in. Liverpool defenders in particular. But if you've got them, I think there's every reason to think about keeping hold of them. Konate at 5.2 million, absolutely nailed on, continues to play, hasn't been rotated yet in the league. Could happen at some point, but doesn't look likely so far. So if he can stay fit, he looks like a really solid option. Trent still has the biggest attacking threat. I think Robertson has to be ignored for now, for sure. And if you've got Robertson, I would be a little bit worried going forward. Like, he's been rotated in the Champions League like Díaz was. Now he's been rotated in the league like Díaz has as well. And that's something that will continue going forward. Again, Robertson will probably start like 4 or 5 of the next 6. But if he's going to come on, that's annoying. Like, sometimes, every now and again in FPL, you get players that are either 0 minutes or 90. And so they're worth going for, because if they've got high upside, happy days. And if they don't play, you get someone off your bench. But we've already seen these players come on for Liverpool. And so if Tsimikas starts, I'm always going to think that Robertson's going to come on. So I wouldn't go there. If I had Robertson, I'd probably lean more towards selling him at this point. And Van Dijk's the solid player that you know is going to play every single week. Does have attacking threat himself as well from set pieces. So in general, I think you can keep Trent, Konate and Van Dijk if you've got them. Robertson, I'd start thinking about selling. I wouldn't buy any of them right now, but the defence has looked really good so far. Mateta didn't start for Crystal Palace. I don't think that's necessarily a sign of things to come, but his minutes are clearly not going to be as good as we probably expected them to be at the start of the season. Like, Nketiah can play as the number 9 on his own. Mateta could play as that single 9 as well. Either way, it gives more time on the pitch for Eze to take those penalties. And I know sometimes we base too many decisions around penalties like this. You know, should we really be thinking this much that if Mateta's not on the pitch for 30 minutes, that's 30 minutes where Eze is going to take penalties? It's not a case that he's now essential or anything like that. Of course not. But it does boost him as an option. It makes him slightly better. Well, that was a bit of a whistle there. I'm not sure how that came out in the video. It makes him slightly better than we thought before Mateta took... Sorry, after Mateta took that penalty, the whistles kind of confused me a bit. After Mateta took the penalty, we thought that Eze was a much worse option, but actually he's probably somewhere in between. And I think for the price, is still potentially good going forward. Johnson, definitely the pick of the Spurs midfielders for me. His goal threat is right up there. 6 in 6. I like the saving over Maddison. I would not go near Kulusevski personally. Mitoma was brilliant in that game against Spurs. Like, it was just Mitoma of old. And I'm sure he's performed well in other games this season, but that's the first time... I think it might be the first time I've watched the whole Brighton game this season. That might be wrong. Either way, it's the first time I've noticed Mitoma that much. I think in terms of Brighton players, they're not bad short-term options for the next 2 game weeks, but I'm not sure I'd be looking too much further than that. Because they got Newcastle away, Wolves at home. Pretty good, especially that Wolves game. But then it's Liverpool away and City at home. So if you've got a stack of transfers and you're wildcarding soon, you want to take a short-term punt, maybe you could go for someone like Mitoma at 6.6. But I think for most people, you're probably waiting until game week 12 onwards, where he has Bournemouth away, Southampton at home, Fulham away, Leicester away, Palace at home, West Ham away, Brentford at home. Great fixture run between 12 and 18. A really nice price. And the other thing I like about him, Brighton have a ton of attacking options, and we've seen rotation already, but he has played, 84 minutes plus in every single game so far, including 4 90 minutes in a row. He's got 1 goal, 3 assists at 6.6 million. It's a pretty good price, and I think in those easier fixtures, there's plenty more returns to come. Just not sure I would buy him right now. But he is looking like the pick of the Brighton attackers alongside Welbeck. And I said last week before game week 7 that I've been a little bit against Welbeck as a pick because of João Pedro. But with him out injured, I think Welbeck's great. Ferguson's not getting a huge amount of minutes. Welbeck's played another 90 against Spurs. He could have had another goal in that game as well. He put up 1.13 expected goals. He's on penalties while João Pedro is out. I think he looks good as a cheap option at 5.8. If you don't want Chris Wood, you don't want Delap, you don't want Calvert-Lewin, I really like the look of Danny Welbeck. The Duran and Watkins combo doesn't look likely. I would imagine that a lot of people watching this video have not been those FPL managers that have bought in John Duran. But if you have, it just doesn't look like he's going to get many starts. Like, if they were going to do it, I felt like that Man United game was the time to try it. And later on in games, they've played together, but not from the start. And so Duran, you just can't go there. Watkins, I still think, is a really nice option, but it's getting to the point now where there's less need to want to bring him in. Like if we look at Aston Villa fixtures, they're not terrible. Fulham away, Bournemouth at home is pretty good, but then it's Spurs away, Liverpool away. I think if you're on wildcard as a long-term option, if you didn't want to go with Haaland, I would definitely consider Watkins. But as a transfer in, three away games in the next 4, 2 of them are Spurs and Liverpool. I mean, Spurs is maybe not that bad. I just don't think I'll be going there right now. And there is always the chance that he could get subbed early for Duran. I think that's less likely to happen now he's built up his fitness. I don't know. I think Watkins is perfectly reasonable to keep. I absolutely would keep if I had him. I don't think I'd buy him. And Duran, just don't go there. Rico Lewis, I'm going to talk about him in my own transfer plans video tomorrow, but he stayed on even when Kyle Walker came on. So I think Luke said this when I was chatting to him on the Twitter space we did before Game Week 6 wildcard. Lewis is basically competing for spots in midfield or that role to invert from defence into midfield. He's not necessarily directly competing with Kyle Walker. And the fact that Lewis played, I think it was the full game. Let me just double check this. Full 90 minutes. Foden came off at 72. Like, it gets to the point where you've almost just got to take what you're seeing and use that moving forward. Like, he's just played another 90 minutes. Foden's come off early. Walker's come on. It hasn't affected him. Maybe his minutes are just good for now. That won't last forever. He's a Man City player. But maybe they're just okay. And Wolves away, Southampton at home is not that bad. Like, they're pretty good fixtures. Bournemouth away is probably okay-ish as well. I still think, though, if I didn't have him, I'd find it difficult to buy him. I think if you've got him, he's probably an easy hold now. But to buy him, like, I don't know, it's 3 away games in the next 4. Wolves, Bournemouth, Brighton. They're all fairly decent attacking sides. Then it's Spurs at home in 12, Liverpool away in 13. Like, how many clean sheets would I back Man City to get here? I think 1 or 2 over the next 6 game weeks. 1 or 2, that's it. Rico Lewis does have some attacking threat, but he's not completely nailed. I don't think I would buy him. Unless it was like a short-term punt before a wild card, I don't think I would do it. And even in that case, I feel like if you've got a defender with a good fixture, you just save the transfer instead. So, like, I'm in 2 minds. One, I'm seeing, like, I'm looking at what we're getting, and that is good minutes out of a player playing in midfield for Man City that costs less than 5 million that's also a defender. Like, in some ways, that should be absolutely essential in our teams, and yet I'm still not quite there with him being at that status, because I've always got in the back of my mind that he's just not going to play. But he keeps playing. And so for that price, he is quite a bit of a bargain. But it's short term because of the fixtures. If I had Lewis, I'd keep him. If I didn't have him, I'd lean more towards ignoring him now. But it could be painful because Wolves away and Southampton at home are good fixtures. Anyway, as always, I'm rambling now. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed that, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Rate 5 stars if you listen on podcasts. Check out Fantasy Football Hub using the link in the description below. I'll catch you again soon.